Hello everybody! In the following lesson, I will be going over the poem Funeral Blues by W.H. Auden. Wystan Hugh, or W.H. Auden, is one of the most influential poets of the 20th century. He was born in England in 1907 and he passed away at the age of 66 in 1973. He studied English at the University of Oxford. He belonged to a group of poets who were influenced by socialist ideas. He immigrated to the USA before World War II. His poetry consists of a wide variety of styles and forms, including elegies like Funeral Blues. We will discuss the meaning of an elegy later in this lesson. In 1956, Auden became Professor of Poetry at Oxford. Let us read through the poem. Stop all the clocks, cut off the telephone. Prevent the dog from barking with a juicy bone. Silence the pianos and with muffled drum, bring out the coffin, let the mourners come. Let aeroplanes circle moaning overhead, scribbling on the sky the message, he is dead. Put crepe bows round the white necks of the public doves. Let the traffic policemen wear black cotton gloves. He was my north, my south, my east and west, my working week and my Sunday rest, my noon, my midnight, my talk, my song. I thought that love would last forever. I was wrong. The stars are not wanted now, put out every one. Pack up the moon and dismantle the sun. Pour away the ocean and sweep up the wood, for nothing now can ever come to any good. Before we delve into a line-by-line analysis, let us briefly look at what this poem is about. This is a mournful poem in which the speaker expresses his overwhelming feelings of grief at the death of his loved one. He feels that there should be dramatic public displays of mourning, such as putting bows around the necks of doves flying around the city to show the devastating extent of his loss. I suppose we can liken this to social media today. Oftentimes we see that when someone passes away, their loved ones provide a mass of photographs, posts, and comments to indicate their grief and sense of loss. He describes how important his beloved was to him in every possible context, and how he assumed that their love would last his whole life. He ends the poem with somewhat of a desire to end the natural world because he feels that without his loved one, nothing good will ever happen again. Let us consider the title of this poem, Funeral Blues. But more specifically, let us take a closer look at the word blues. One association we can make with the word blues is the genre of music originating in the USA among the African American community, arising from the songs sung by slaves from West Africa. Music that falls within the blues genre generally features slow, reflective melodies and lyrics. Oftentimes, the sorrows of life is the subject matter. It is from this where we get the concept of the phrase of having the blues, which means to feel sad or depressed. In relation to the title, by bringing the word funeral and the word blues together, we can say that the title refers to the feelings of sadness associated with the death of a loved one. We will now be going through a line-by-line analysis of this poem. Let's begin with the first stanza. The first lines read, "Stop all the clocks, cut off the telephone, prevent the dog from barking with a juicy bone." In these lines, the speaker makes reference to an old mourning custom common in 19th century Britain. In the house of the deceased person, the clocks would be stopped from ticking and the telephone would be cut off so that no one could call. These customs are seldom seen or heard of in today's times. In these lines, what figure of speech do we have here? We have allusion in these lines. Remember, allusion is a figure of speech in which another object or circumstance is referred to indirectly. In this case, we have an allusion to or an indirect reference to the old mourning traditions in 19th century Britain. Stopping the clocks and cutting off the telephone would bring about a sense of silence in the deceased person's household. And in this vein, the speaker shows the same desire for silence when he requests that the dog is prevented from barking. Could we say these lines are forms of hyperbole or exaggeration? The answer is yes, we could. Lines 3 and 4 read, "Silence the pianos and with muffled drum, bring out the coffin, let the mourners come." We could interpret these lines as that instead of happy or tuneful piano music, the speaker wants the slow, solemn beat of muffled drums. Remember that to muffle a sound means to make a sound softer and less clear. In this case, with muffled drum describes the drum sometimes used at military funerals, with cloth placed around the drumsticks to soften the noise. Once this is done, the speaker is ready for the coffin to be brought out as the mourners arrive. Let us take a closer look at the word muffled. We can say that this word is an example of onomatopoeia, and here we can interpret the silence of household noises being broken by the muffled drum of the funeral procession. Notice that at the end of line 3, there is no punctuation mark, which indicates a run-on line or enjambment. This gives a smooth transition to the last line of the first stanza. Here is a quick recap of stanza 1. The speaker describes how he wants to stop all everyday activity and observe strict mourning. The speaker describes his pain and links his despair to the world around him. The reference to clocks, telephone, dog, and pianos looks at the speaker's reaction to his immediate surroundings from the perspective of loss. Notice that the rhyme scheme of stanza 1 follows the pattern AABB. In case you are not familiar with how a rhyme scheme is allocated in poetry, I will explain this briefly. The first line of the poem ends with the word telephone. We allocate this word and line 1 the letter A. In the next line, the last word is bone. The word bone rhymes with the word telephone. Hence, we allocate the same letter to line 2 of this poem. In line 3 of this poem, the last word of the line is drum. Notice that the word drum neither rhymes with the word bone nor with the word telephone. Therefore, we allocate it the next letter in the alphabet, the letter B. Line 4 would also be allocated the letter B, as the word come rhymes with the word drum. This is a simple method you can apply to any poem when deciphering the rhyme scheme of that poem. Oftentimes you are asked to comment on the diction in particular lines of poetry. Remember that diction refers to the poet's choice of words. I try and get my learners to remember that the word diction is part of the word dictionary, and within a dictionary we find words from which to choose. Let us briefly discuss the diction in stanza 1. After a death in a family during the 19th century, instructions would be given for the mourning traditions to be carried out. In this stanza, the speaker seems to imitate these instructions because the diction or choice of words take the form of brief, authoritative commands. These commands include words like stop and cut off found in line 1, the word prevent in line 2, and the word silence in line 3. Remember that the concept of tone in poetry refers to the feelings or the attitude of the speaker. This is often conveyed through the poet's diction. In your literature exam, you could potentially expect a question that asks about how the poet's diction conveys the tone of the poem, as these two concepts go hand in hand. This is something just for you to keep in mind. The speaker's tone in stanza 1 is abrupt or short and almost angry, as he reveals the sad instruction about setting up the signs of mourning. He is stopping everything that signifies everyday life. The only thing he welcomes is the coffin and the mourners. Let's have a look at the next 4 lines, which make up the second stanza of the poem. The first 2 lines of the second stanza read, "Let aeroplanes circle moaning overhead, scribbling on the sky the message, he is dead." Here the speaker wants his overwhelming grief to be demonstrated to the public. This is an expansion of his surroundings compared to the first stanza. Keep in mind that in the first stanza, the displays of grief were in the speaker's immediate surroundings. The speaker wants to display his grief by seeing aeroplanes rising in the sky for all to see the news that he, his loved one, is dead. Let's have a look at the phrase aeroplanes circle moaning overhead. What figure of speech do we have here? Well done to you if you said personification. The aeroplanes are given the human quality of being able to moan. If we consider the word moaning, we can say this word is an example of onomatopoeia. The word moaning could be said to imitate the humming sound of a light aircraft in the sky overhead. Notice that there is no punctuation mark at the end of line 5, an indication of enjambment. We can say this gives a smooth transition to line 6 and places emphasis on the phrase "he is dead," as this phrase ends the line. Lines 7 and 8 of the poem read, "Put crepe bows round the white necks of the public doves. Let the traffic policemen wear black cotton gloves." In line with the public display of the speaker's grief, the speaker would like bows of crepe, which is a type of fabric, to be tied round the necks of doves. In 19th century Britain, the custom was to display fabric bows on the door of the deceased's home to alert any visitors of the death. Along with the public display of grief, even the policemen should wear black gloves. Of course, these expectations of aeroplanes flying with messages above, putting bows on all of the doves in the streets, and having all the policemen wear black gloves are unrealistic and exaggerated desires. These exaggerated desires emphasize just how wild and overwhelmed the speaker is with grief. The question here is, are these lines forms of hyperbole? Most definitely they are, as mentioned, to emphasize the extent of the speaker's grief. A recap of stanza 2 is that the speaker lists the public signs of mourning he would like to see, and that these signs of mourning extend now outside of the speaker's personal space into the public space with aeroplanes, doves, and traffic policemen. If you follow the same rhyme scheme pattern that was explained for stanza 1, you will notice that for stanza 2 the rhyme scheme is as follows. The word overhead rhymes with the word dead, which are both given the letter C. And because the word doves does not rhyme with any other word prior to this line, it is allocated the letter D. Because the word gloves rhymes with the word doves, the word gloves is also allocated with the letter D. The rhyme scheme for stanza 2 is therefore CCDD. Let us take a quick look at the diction in stanza 2. The speaker mentions the aeroplanes moaning. We can say that this word describes a noise of pain and grief. The message the speaker would like scribbled in the sky is "He is dead." Notice that this person's name is not mentioned. We could say that this indicates the person's importance, and also because the words "he" and "dead" are given capital letters. The mention of words like crepe bows and black cotton gloves are words that suggest mourning. The tone of this stanza can be described as hysterical. The speaker's desire to share his loss with others, even the general public, leads to an almost hysterical, in other words, distraught or panic-stricken tone, as he suggests impossible ways of marking this death that means so much to him. Stanza 3 consists of lines 9 to 12 of this poem. Lines 9 to 10 read, "He was my north, my south, my east and west, my working week and my Sunday rest." In each of these lines, what figure of speech do we have? Nice going if you answered metaphor. Let us consider the first metaphor. He was my north, my south, my east and west. Here the speaker's loved one is compared to compass directions. We can ask what this suggests, and we can interpret this as the speaker's loved one gave him direction and stability in his life. The next metaphor in line 10, my working week and my Sunday rest. Here the speaker's loved one is compared to the speaker's days of the week. We can say that the speaker's loved one filled every day of the week and all hours of the day. In other words, the speaker's loved one was an integral part of the speaker's existence. The speaker continues in lines 11 and 12. My noon, my midnight, my talk, my song. I thought that love would last forever. I was wrong. When we consider the line, my noon, my midnight, my talk, my song, and when we ask what figure of speech we have in this line, we can say we have another metaphor. Here we can make the interpretation that the relationship was one that thrived through both ordinary conversation and companionship, as well as moments of joy. Can we say these images represent the completeness and wholeness of their love? Yes, we can. We could make the assumption that the speaker and his loved one shared a life together. When we consider this line, I thought that love would last forever. I was wrong. Notice that the previous lines were metaphorical and heartwarming, but this line is a reminder of the harsh reality that loved ones do die and no love lasts forever. We will all face the death of a loved one at some stage in our lives. Take note of the use of a colon here in line 12. We could say that line 12 achieves an emotional impact through its simplicity. Out of everything that has been stated about the speaker's loved one and his thought that the love would last forever, the use of the colon is used to state the devastating realization that the speaker was indeed wrong. Stanza 3 was a description of how complete and absorbing their love was, and how devastated he is to find that this love will not, after all, last forever. Following the same pattern as previously explained, you will notice that the rhyme scheme for stanza 3 is E-E-F-F, with the word west rhyming with the word rest, and the word song rhyming with the word wrong. Regarding the diction or the word choice in stanza 3, the speaker describes what his loved one meant to him, beginning with "he was," and then listing the images that show the completeness of their love. He repeats the words "my" many times to emphasize their closeness. "My noon, my song," for example. In line 12, the speaker makes a simple statement using the word "I," which shows his new state of loneliness, and where he acknowledges how wrong he had been to believe that his loved one would always be with him. Notice here in stanza 3 that the tone is still sad, but compared to stanza 2, where the tone was quite wild or hysterical with grief, the tone here is calmer as the speaker describes nostalgically or with fondness how his loved one meant everything to him. The stanza concludes with a moving and poignant statement in line 12, where the speaker states, "I was wrong." This contrast in tone from stanza 2 to stanza 3 demonstrates what a shock the sudden and unexpected loss of his loved one has been to him. Stanza 4 is the final stanza in the poem, containing lines 13 to 16. The last 4 lines of the poem read, "The stars are not wanted now, put out every one. Pack up the moon and dismantle the sun. Pour away the ocean and sweep up the wood, for nothing now can ever come to any good." Are these lines forms of hyperbole or exaggeration? Yes, we can say that they are. Let us take a look at the words put out, pack up, dismantle, pour away, and sweep up. Would you agree that these words can be likened to what we do to items in a household when we are cleaning up? Therefore, we can say that we have an extended metaphor here. The elements in the universe, the stars, the moon, the sun, the ocean, and the wood, are compared to unwanted household items to clear away. We can interpret this as the speaker showing his feelings that nothing has value now after he has lost his loved one. Consider the use of the word ever. By including this word in the line "for nothing now can ever come to any good," suggests a sense of total hopelessness. Remember that in stanza 1, the speaker's displays of grief were within his personal space. In stanza 2, these displays were extended into the public space. But notice here in stanza 4, the speaker also shows the extent of his despair, but his grief is so extreme it is now extended to the universe. If we take the analysis of these lines a step further, we could say that this final stanza plays on images often associated with romantic love: the stars in the night sky, the shining moon, romantic walks along the beach, or picnics in nature. These conventions are destroyed as the speaker requests that these symbols are stripped of their meanings, as nothing can ever come to any good. Stanza 4's content is that the speaker expresses the wish to end everything, even elements of the universe like the stars and the sun, because he does not see any hope for the future anymore. As has been mentioned before, the speaker has linked his grief to the world around him. Firstly, his grief surrounded his immediate environment. Secondly, it extended to the public. In this last stanza, his grief extends to the universal sphere of stars, moon, sun, ocean, and wood. The rhyme scheme in stanza 4 is GGHH, with the word one rhyming with the word sun, and the word would rhyming with the word good. The choice of words or the diction in stanza 4 is that the words used in the stanza show how the speaker has lost all enthusiasm for life. He feels as if the world may as well end. He uses words and phrases such as not wanted, put out, pack up, dismantle, pour away, and sweep up. These words remind us of someone cleaning up and packing away things after something is over and done. The phrase nothing now in the last line emphasizes that the speaker feels there is nothing left for him after the loss of his beloved. In a similar way to stanza 2, the speaker returns to his tone of near hysterical grief when he describes how he wants to put out the stars and dismantle the sun. This demonstrates the depth of his grief and is reinforced by the bleak statement in the last line, for nothing now can ever come to any good. Now that we have gone through each stanza of the poem, let us discuss the poem as a whole in terms of the form and structure. We describe this poem as an elegy, which is a mournful funeral poem for someone who has died. The structure of this poem is that it comprises of 4 stanzas with 4 lines in each stanza. Each stanza's 4 lines rhyme regularly. The rhyme scheme of the entire poem is AA, BB, CC, DD, EE, FF, GG, HH. We can divide the contents of the poem into each stanza in that each stanza explores a different aspect of the speaker's grief. Stanza 1 explores the speaker's personal or home environment. Stanza 2 extends to the public surroundings. Stanza 3 explains the nature of the speaker's love for the deceased. And stanza 4 looks beyond to elements of nature in the greater universe. Lastly, let us mention that the rhythm of the poem is regular, and that it is the regular rhyme scheme that contributes to this. And finally, this regular rhythm and rhyme is fitting for a blues musical piece, relating back to the fact that this poem is titled Funeral Blues. Thank you for watching this presentation on the poem Funeral Blues. Please make sure you subscribe to my channel for more lessons and presentations on various topics related to English Home Language and English First Additional Language for grades 8 to 12.